Every 25 years, the king of Gerbera is eaten by a dragon. It is tradition. What's that, young one? No, I imagine it isn't very pleasant, but what else is the human king to do? He has his honor to uphold, after all. And a deal's a deal. One king every quarter century, and in exchange, the dragons leave the villages of Gerbera well enough alone. That's the way it's always been, for nearly 1,000 years. No, I am not that old. You mind your tongue, Kit, before I toss you to the shadow bears for breakfast. Of course I'm joking. Your mother would be furious with me. Why do the dragons want kings? How should I know? Maybe they taste better than ordinary humans? Leave it to dragons to be so particular. And no, I don't know why they wait 25 years. Maybe that's when a human is ripe? I don't care to think about it too much, if you don't mind. Now hold still, I'll get this twig untangled from your fur. Well, the humans have no choice, you see. They must keep the peace with the fire beasts. They've nowhere else to go. Beyond their forest is Dragon Mountain, and that's where the world ends. Everyone knows that. Besides, humans are not as clever as foxes, dear. But don't hold that against them. They do their best. Ugh, stop squirming about, would you? Almost got that blasted twig free. What's that? Where do they get the new king? Perhaps they grow kings like carrots. My whispers, you ask so many questions. You are giving me a headache. Fine, you may ask one more if you must. What would happen if a king didn't present himself to the dragons? Whiskers of mercy, I pale to think of it. Our forest stretches to the base of Dragon Mountain, after all. The fury of the dragon fire would surely be the end of everyone. No, youngling, do not fret. You have nothing to fear. Don't you see? The human king always comes just as he should. It has forever been thus. He gives his life to save us all. Now sleep, little one. If you're quiet enough, you can hear the moon rise. A great many years later, Blue the stable boy woke to the smell of fear. It pushed down on him like a foal sitting on his ribcage. He scrambled up from his hay-pile bed, his clothes soaked through with sweat, trying to shake himself from his sleepy stupor. He stumbled through the stable gates to the training area outside, strands of hay clinging to his trousers. Nothing looked out of the ordinary with the first bits of sunlight peeking over the tops of the massive stone walls of the castle. The quietness of the grounds rested gently against his thumping heart. Where was it coming from? To Blue, fear always smelled of wood and oranges, though he was never sure why. For as long as he could remember, he'd been able to smell certain emotions the way someone might detect scents of different flowers. It took many years before he even realized what was happening, since none of the other castle servants shared that strange talent. For the longest time, no one even believed him, which only left him feeling confused and embarrassed. Then one day, a very bored 7-year-old Blue had been exploring the eastern towers. He ran into, quite literally, Lady Zoya, the royal mage of Gerbera. Lady Zoya kindly explained his weird ability, assuring Blue it was an incredible gift. Blue still wasn't sure about that. Most times his knack felt like a burden. Still, in time, he'd learned to pay attention to it, and so had everyone else. Blue shivered in the dawnlight, scanning his surroundings once more. Right now, the fear clung to the air so fiercely it could only mean someone close by was trapped in the worst sort of peril. But Blue couldn't place where it was coming from. The weight in his chest sank even deeper. He'd smelled fear this strongly only 3 times in his life. Once, when the stables had caught fire. Again, when Old Man Albert had fallen from the roof trying to repair a loose shingle. And lastly, when one of the kitchen servants had had a severe allergic reaction to strawberries. Each time, Blue had been right there to help, but now he couldn't see anyone. Silence hung in the air, except for the soft snores of the king's horses. Then, like a weather vane shifting suddenly with a strong wind, the fear dissipated, the scent of woody citrus nothing more than a memory. Blue frowned, running his hands through his hair as he scanned the castle walls once more for any clues. But the fear was quite simply gone. And how'd I know you'd be up so early, Blue Boy? Blue turned to see Suri Hakimi, one of the older stable servants, pushing her way through the gate. Her dark hair was pulled into a ponytail under a plum-colored beanie, and when she smiled, her deep brown eyes seemed to shine. "What are you doing here?" asked Blue, though it was no stranger a thing for him to be standing outside barefoot at dawn. "Finished my family chores last night, so my mom let me come early." A small ache pierced Blue's chest. Whenever Suri or the other stable servants talked about their families, Blue couldn't help but feel a jealous longing. "I checked the stable. When you weren't in your bed, I figured you got an early start prepping cedar." She rolled her eyes. "Don't think I didn't notice her shiny new horseshoes waiting by your bed. Trying to get that promotion you are, you sneaky bugger." Well, that was definitely true. Blue wanted nothing more than to get promoted to stable manager, and he'd been working overtime all year to prove himself to Albert, the stable master. Suri's bronze cheeks flushed as understanding dawned in her eyes. "Oh, you had another episode, didn't you?" she guessed, dropping her gaze to her shoes. It always made people uncomfortable to talk about Blue's ability, even if they'd learned to trust it. "It was some of the worst fear I've ever smelled. I thought for sure the stable was on fire again, then it just disappeared." Blue's arms fell against his sides in defeat. "I just don't get it." "Well, it might not be so hard to guess what it was," said Suri, nodding to the castle. Blue followed her gaze to the northernmost tower window. "The king?" "Well, of course. Today was Dragon Day. At the 9 o'clock gong, the king of Gerbera would set out beyond the kingdom, through the peculiar forest and up to Dragon Mountain, where he'd promptly be eaten. The king didn't know this, of course. He only believed he would set out to slay the dragon that began to terrorize the other villages. The dragon showed up exactly every 25 years to goad the newest king into battle. And it always ended the same. 3 days after the king departed, his horse would return with a note from the dragon thanking Gerbera for another fine meal. Everyone knew this except the king himself. The entire kingdom, and especially the castle staff, took great pains to keep it from him. From the moment a new king was crowned, always an orphaned infant from one of Gerbera's villages, he knew nothing of his fate. It was easier that way. There were no parents to miss him. And what kind of life would it be to know he would grow up to be eaten by a dragon? Better to let that be an unfortunate surprise. At least, that was how one of the kitchen servants had explained it to Blue when he'd asked so many years ago. Blue frowned, eyeing Dragon Mountain rising far in the distance, its mighty peak hiding in the morning clouds. The end of the world. And, soon enough, the end of the line for another valiant king of Gerbera. He sighed, a small twinge of doubt throbbing against his temples. But Suri's theory made more sense than anything else. Of course the king would have fears about fighting the dragon, no matter how brave and noble he was raised to be. Still, why did the fear disappear so suddenly? "Come on, we might as well get an early start," said Suri, clapping Blue on the shoulder with a dubious look at the king's tower. "There's really nothing we can do for him, you know." "I suppose you're right." Blue exhaled, a pang of sadness floating through him. Poor king. Such a terrible fate. "Best we can do is give His Majesty a proper send-off." "That's the spirit! Those horses will be shining pretty before breakfast." With a defeated sigh, Blue followed Suri back to the stables. The large A-frame building stood welcoming, the morning sunbeams sliding across the timber roof like a slow golden yawn. Beyond the arched stone entrance, 2 rows of stables housed the horses of His Majesty's 40 royal knights. Blue had worked in the stables since the age of 3, as soon as he was old enough for Albert to teach him how to use a grooming brush. Blue knew each horse better than the knights themselves did. He had the advantage, of course, since he lived in the stables, while the knights and other stable servants went home to their families each evening. The stables were Blue's home. By age 12, he'd risen in the ranks, working hoof and horseshoe in hope of earning the promotion to stable manager. It would near double his responsibilities during the day, but it would allow him more free time in the evenings to ride Cedar, the colt he'd raised from birth. He'd only really ever wanted two things in life: to work with horses and to have a family of his own someday. If he did well prepping for the Dragon Day ceremony, that promotion was as good as his. He and Cedar could spend all their afternoons together. Blue and Surrey got to work washing, brushing, and saddling their teams. The smell of hay and manure set Blue into an easy rhythm. By the time Albert came to wake him, just as the other stable servants were arriving, Blue was already done with his morning duties. "Up before the sun again, are you, Blue?" muttered Albert, giving Cedar's reddish-brown coat a once-over. He adjusted his messenger hat over his balding head. The old man was not one to give compliments easily, but Blue's horses were all immaculate, especially Cedar. Grumpy old Albert had nothing to complain about today. "And you think this horse be fit for a king?" asked Albert, crossing his beige arms against his chest. Blue grinned confidently. "Yes, sir. Her coat's brighter than buttermilk, and her form is good. I even triple-braided her tail." Cedar let out a snort, and Blue patted the bridge of her nose. He hated braiding because of how it aggravated Cedar, but the king preferred it. And Cedar had a real shot at being chosen for the Dragon Day ceremony. She was too young to be picked as the king's personal steed, but she stood in the running to be one of the processionals. Albert's brows scrunched together in what might have been the beginning contemplations of flattery, but Blue wouldn't get to find out. An ear-splitting scream rose from outside. Then another. "That's coming from the castle," said Blue, his heart giving a knowing thump. "Sounds like Pierre spotted another rat in the garden," grunted Albert, waving his hand in a dismissive manner. Blue frowned. While the royal chef was prone to his fair number of shrieks at the sight of spiders, mice, or any other creature scampering about, this was something else. Blue smelled wood and citrus again. It came in spurts, like not just one big fear, but the fear of many. By this time, all the other stable hands had reported for work. They now followed Blue through the gates. Albert hobbled behind them reluctantly, muttering about Pierre's petty frights. Enzo, one of the gardener's sons, was sprinting across the castle lawn, his eyes wider than those of a feather-plucked chicken. "Albert! Clear everyone out of the stables!" Enzo cried, his legs going wobbly beneath him. What are you yelling about, Enzo?" croaked Albert, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "My mother sent me to tell you." Enzo sputtered between gasps, his curly dark hair a windblown mess. "The knights need this stable for an emergency meeting. They're on their way now. You need to clear out." "What's happened?" asked Blue. "What's this emergency meeting for?" Enzo's light brown eyes blazed like wildfire, the smell of woody citrus saturating the air around him. "The king is dead!" It took less than 2 clicks of a gallop for Albert to kick his 12 stable hands out on their rears. In the commotion, Blue scampered up to the enormous crossbeam that ran down the middle of the stable's A-frame ceiling. He discovered this hiding spot many night gatherings ago, mostly on a dare from Surrey. From atop the wide rafter, he could squeeze comfortably between the beam and the ceiling, remaining hidden 10 feet above the royal knights, who now gathered below. Blue was surprised that Lady Zoya had joined them. He hadn't seen the royal mage for years, not since she'd explained his strange knack for smelling emotions. She looked just as mesmerizing as he remembered, neither old nor young, but fierce. Her platinum hair was cropped short on the sides and underneath, and long on top. Her dark blue eyes matched her glittering navy cloak, which hung to the floor, and her pale skin looked freshly painted with purple symbols on her palms and cheekbones. It was rumored that Lady Zoya emerged from her tower only in times of dire emergency to offer guidance and counsel from a magical perspective. All Gerberans believed that magic was an evil born from dragons, so its use was permitted only during times of great peril. And, even then, with much reluctance. Blue scooted carefully along the rafter, ignoring the puffs of dust threatening to bring on a sneeze attack, until he lay just above Lady Zoya. The room smelled of enough fear to fuel the royal kitchen furnace as Lady Zoya's eyes scanned the room. "For those who haven't heard, a tragedy of the worst sort has cast a shadow across our kingdom," said Lady Zoya. "Minutes ago, one of the servants went to wake the king, and he would not stir. Good Knights of Gerbera, our king is dead. The aroma of sorrow, lilac and mint, mixed with the rising dust. Protocol is clear, written by the Gerbera Knight Councils of old, said Lady Zoya. The semicircles painted on her cheeks seemed to glow. She unfurled a long black scroll, blowing away a layer of dust before reading. In the dire case of a king's death before Dragon Day, a new king must be chosen from the circle of the brave. I will do the honors, said a short knight, stepping forward. Blue recognized Sir Huxley, his gray hair and mustache meticulously groomed, as usual. He'd always been kind to Blue, letting him ride a horse for the first time and slipping him extra sweets from the royal kitchen. I'm the oldest, and it's only right. But you have a wife and children, another knight, Lady Camilla, pointed out. She'd tightened her long dark ponytail for emphasis. It would be cruel to leave them without a husband and father. Then I'll do it, said another. I'm the youngest. Too young, argued yet another. Lady Zoya held up her hands. It is not up to any of you, noble ones. We must leave such a choice to the fates. There were several murmurs about the fates being magical mumbo-jumbo, but no one seemed brave enough to challenge the mage outright. Lady Zoya raised her right palm, spreading her pale, thin fingers slowly. From his vantage point, Blue saw the large white crescent before the others did. It stretched from one side of Lady Zoya's hand to the other. A chorus of gasps filled the room. A dragon tooth, someone breathed. Indeed, said Lady Zoya, with a hint of finality in her tone. This tooth holds the only remaining magic in Gerbera, and it never fails. It will choose our next king. Several knights shifted uncomfortably. Blue couldn't blame them. Magic was nothing but bad luck. Everyone knew that. An icy chill worked its way through Blue's chest. At the same time, something glittered in the corner of his eye. He looked up to see a thick, golden thread hovering about a horseshoe's length from his forehead. He craned his neck to get a better view. The golden string stretched to the far wall like a sparkling web woven by a mysterious spider. And it sang. A chorus of high fluttering notes poured from the thread. Blue peeked down, but if any of the knights heard the music above them, they paid no notice. They were too focused on the dragon tooth now spinning wildly in Lady Zoya's palm. Blue shook his head. Webs weren't gold, and they didn't make music. As if to prove him wrong, the singing grew louder and louder, until Blue had to press his palms against his ears. Great torture of fire breathers! How could no one else hear this noise? Maybe if he could just... Blue reached up and pulled the thread toward him. Instead of snapping from its grip on the wall, the thread only grew stronger, as if it were being pulled through the wall. And before Blue could make any sense of it, the thread disappeared. Cripes! Someone called out. Blue jerked his head from the rafter to watch. The spinning dragon tooth now glowed emerald, a beam of light pouring out of it. The green glow swirled around the room in a wide spiral above the knights. Then the rafters started to tremble. What? Is that an earthquake? Cried Lady Camilla. Stand firm, Lady Zoya commanded as the ground beneath their feet continued to rumble. A resounding crack ripped through the air, louder than a thunderbolt, its force knocking Blue from his hiding place. He tumbled off the beam onto a very startled group of knights, several of whom uttered a word or two quite undignified as they landed in a heap. It's that fool Blue boy, someone muttered. Nearly broke my neck, said someone else. Blue groaned. He'd landed mostly on bony shoulders, and, thankfully, it was the burly Sir Kunma who'd broken his fall. At least they'd all left their lances elsewhere. What you playin' at hiding up there, boy? Growled Sir Kunma, shoving Blue off him. I'm sorry, said Blue, pushing to his feet. His cheeks burned, and he couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Are you all right, child? Asked Lady Zoya, her eyes scanning his face. Blue nodded, and her eyes widened, staring at something on his right cheek. As soon as she looked at it, Blue's face itched something fierce. What's happening to his skin? Asked Sir Huxley, taking a step back. Got injured in the fall, most like, someone said. No, Lady Zoya breathed. She cupped Blue's face in her hands. Look at this. These crescent markings on his cheekbones. She traced a finger along Blue's right cheek. The dragon tooth has chosen him. Blue let out a sigh of relief at Lady Zoya's touch, the unbearable itching finally ceasing. But as his brain caught up to Lady Zoya's words, his stomach clamped tighter than stretched leather. What? Blue asked. Chosen him, scoffed Sir Kunma, hand on his sword hilt. Can't be, said another. Sir Kunma shrugged. Then again, he's got no family, so it's not really much of a loss, is it? Before Blue could blink, Lady Camilla crossed the room and shoved Sir Kunma so hard he fell on his rear. You should be ashamed, she thundered. That's right, Sir Huxley growled at Sir Kunma. He's only a boy, for mercy's sake. Stable boy, Sir Kunma grumbled. He pushed himself to his feet with a loud grunt of disapproval. Lady Camilla put a hand on Blue's shoulder. It must be a mistake. Magic doesn't make mistakes, Lady Zoya said solemnly. She put a finger under Blue's chin. The smell of wood and citrus rose around her, and a deep shiver slithered through Blue's core. I don't understand, said Blue, his voice barely a whisper. You must be very brave now, said Lady Zoya, trying to give him a reassuring smile. You, stable boy, have been chosen as our new king. Gerbera's newest king sat atop his horse, Cedar, surrounded by 40 knights and their steeds, waiting for the castle gates to open for Dragon Day. The ceremony was always a complete and utter sham, in a very respectable way. Every quarter century, bright banners bearing the royal lion crest lined the streets. The villagers waved balloons as children stuffed themselves with too many sweets, cheering their king's bravery as he rode off to Dragon Mountain. Normally, the facade at least made sense, as the king didn't actually know his own sealed fate the way everyone else did. So they'd praise his valor from the streets, reciting their prayers for his hasty return. All lies, wrapped in kindness. But not today. Word spread quickly of the king's death, and the streets were packed tightly, too crowded even for ample balloon waving. Everyone gathered to see the new king. Many of the knightly wives clutched their children close, praying it wasn't their husband who'd been chosen. Their wait was agony. But how could they possibly know that in many ways the truth was even worse than their deepest fears? For when the castle gates finally opened, just past noon, and the new king's processional marched forth, the villagers looked past the 40 knights riding in their perfect rows. Some people cheered. It was hard to break custom, after all. But when the new king's horse came into view through the gated archway, clearly recognizable with its emerald-studded saddle, a collective gasp of horror shuddered through the crowd. "He's only a child!" someone cried. Blue gave quiet thanks to the fates that he'd skipped breakfast. If he hadn't, it might well have turned up all over the cobblestone street. Thousands of people lined up for miles on end, all of them gaping at him with shock and dismay. He gripped the reins steadily, all too aware of the adult-sized royal purple tunic hanging past his knees, clearly too large for his 12-year-old body. His blonde hair was parted to one side, as per royal custom. The glittering crown kept slipping down past his ears. It was all Blue could do to concentrate on Cedar's gentle steps underneath him. Her familiar scent was almost comforting enough to drown out the overwhelming wood and citrus blanketing the air with fear. Almost. "We can't send a child to the fire beast," someone called out, and a chorus of agreement rose through the crowd. Blue's lips trembled as he tightened his grip on the reins. It was rotten luck, really. This was the first time Blue had been chosen for anything. He'd never been anyone's first choice, not even his own parents'. Until now? Thanks to that blasted dragon tooth. But he would not let fear overcome him. Blue was Gerbera's chosen king, And sure, his coronation had been rather hurried and awkward, and his kingly reign might last only a few days, ending with him in the bowels of a fire beast. None of it made sense. None of it was fair to Blue, none the least. But why shouldn't it be him? The unwanted child abandoned on the castle steps at birth and raised as a ward of the king? Didn't Blue now have a chance to be significant? He could be brave for his kingdom, couldn't he? Or at least look the part. Inhaling deeply, he forced a smile, giving his best wave to the crowd. Several people burst into tears. "He knows!" someone called. "It isn't right," called someone else. But the shouts of protest dwindled to a deep silence as the procession continued through the middle of the village, lilac and mint saturating the air. The only sound was the clip-clopping of hooves against the cobblestone road, punctuated by the occasional sob from the crowd. After all, what else could be done? A king had been chosen, and the dragons waited for no man. A deal was a deal. On and on it went, through every village of Gerbera, for hours on end, until the royal procession at last reached the edge of the peculiar forest. As far as the eye could see, birch trees swept across the landscape, a blanket of silver green lying in Dragon Mountain's shadow. "We must leave you here, your majesty," said Sir Huxley with a small bow. He'd been kind enough to ride nearest to Blue, as he'd known the young king best. Blue nodded as if he understood. But how could he truly be here, about to enter that forest of 1,000 deaths, and with the royal crown on his head, no less? None of it seemed real. "This will get you through the forest," said Huxley, handing Blue a small compass attached to a silver chain necklace. "A gift from the dragons, so they say, handed down to each king. Usually it accompanies the king's horse when it, returns to the castle." Returns to the castle without the king was Huxley's meaning, of course. Blue peered down at the brass compass, the weight of it heavy in his quivering palm. 2 arrows pointed in different directions, one smaller than the other. At the top of the compass, a black triangle was etched in the place for north. 3 dots were painted on the bottom, where south should have been. The compass felt strange and wrong, like everything else about the day. "Follow the triangle to get to Dragon Mountain, and the 3 dots will get you back to the castle." Huxley cleared his throat, the absurdity of his statement settling between them. Because of course Blue would never need the 3 dots for anything. Huxley leaned in closer and clapped the young king on the shoulder. "Be brave, Blue. May the honor of Gerbera serve you faithfully on your quest." "Thank you, Huxley," Blue managed to choke out as he slipped the compass around his neck. "It should have been one of us," Huxley told him, and several knights murmured their agreement. "You're a good lad, Blue. Sir. Clearly as brave as they come. But it isn't right. And I'm just..." Huxley looked away suddenly, inhaling a shaky breath. "I'm just sorry, is all. We'll make sure your name is remembered. You have my word." Blue's eyes stung. His name remembered? A name that wasn't really a name. He found this tragic and funny all at once. King Blue? It didn't exactly have a heroic ring to it. Still, he appreciated Huxley's heart. And suddenly, the weight of what Blue was about to do squeezed him tighter than his new leather riding boots. He tried to respond, but all he could do was wipe his eyes with his royal sleeve and try not to notice all the knights before him doing the same. Huxley gave Blue's shoulder a quick pat, then beat his right fist against his chest armor. 39 knights behind him did the same. "Long live the king!" shouted Huxley. "Long live the king!" the knights echoed. Blue regarded the knights with a swell of gratitude in his chest. He was a phony king and they knew it, but they treated him as a proper king just the same. It was the kindest gift they could have given him. "Thank you all," Blue said in the strongest voice he could muster. He shot one last glance towards the villages and the castle in the distance. Somewhere past the stone walls sat the royal stables, which had served as his home these past 12 years. Blue wondered briefly if his parents might have been out in the crowds today, and if they would have recognized him. He'd always wanted to meet them, but now he never would. In fact, he would never get to have a family at all. A familiar memory flashed in his mind. 2 eyes, blue as the sea, gazing down at him. He shook the thought away and turned Cedar toward the peculiar forest. Dragon Mountain loomed in the distance, beyond the trees. Funny how his first trip beyond the castle walls would take him to the end of the world. "Come on, Cedar," said Blue, tugging the reins gently and turning the compass toward the Black Mountain. Without another look back, the King of Gerbera disappeared into the trees, with the sorrow stench of 40 knights in his wake. Once Cedar stepped through the tree line, the peculiar forest swallowed Blue whole. Trees stretched in every direction, denser than morning fog. He shifted in his saddle and patted Cedar's head encouragingly. "It's all right, girl," he soothed, though everything was most definitely not all right, and his horse could sense it. As they padded onward, every legend Blue had ever heard about the forest came to life before him, the absurdities only increasing the further they traveled. Birds that growled like bears, golden bubbles that sang poetry, trees growing upside down. But the worst of it came after they crossed a small stream into complete silence, as if someone had stuffed Blue's ears shut. Blue had never known silence such as this. It wasn't like nighttime at the stables, with the horses deep in sleep, or the moment at dawn right before the royal rooster gave a holler. It wasn't even the quiet of being alone in an empty room. In fact, he was surrounded by critters. At least 10 sets of eyes looked down on him from the treetops in every direction. He wasn't alone, and yet nothing moved. Unblinking eyes ogled him. Not a leaf fluttered. Even a row of red ants sat halted around a tree trunk. The smell of fear soaked the air around him, but it wasn't only his fear. Cedar slowed beneath him, her woody citrus scent swirling in with the rest. Were the animals afraid of him? Were they so unaccustomed to seeing humans? No, that couldn't be it. If they were afraid, they would run away, wouldn't they? A large stag stared at Blue from behind a violet tree trunk, his beautiful antlers stretching toward the sky. Blue urged Cedar onward, the compass thumping against his chest as she broke into a nervous trot. "You're a long way from home, two-legger." The voice shattered the silence, sending Cedar rearing onto her hind legs. Blue's heart nearly beat out of his chest. He patted Cedar's neck, calming her jitters enough to hold her still as he searched the trees. No one was there. "Oh, won't you kindly make haste?" said the voice. At that, Blue spotted a silver and orange fox sitting on a gnarled tree stump. The fox tilted its head and let out an aggravated huff. "I can't get on with my hunting until you've moved past," the fox grumbled. Blue blinked. A talking fox? "It's because of your compass," said the fox, nodding toward the frozen stag. "They know you're marked for the fire breathers. They don't dare disturb you." And even though there is a burrow of plump, juicy rabbits only 10 yards off, it isn't right for me to hunt them while you're here. Not in their state, you see. It isn't proper." The fox sighed. "No matter how hungry I might be." "Why aren't you frozen like the other animals?" asked Blue. "It's the dragon magic of the compass that compels them, but I am not bound by such spells." "Why not?" The fox scoffed, hopping off the tree trunk.
That's a rather forward question, isn't it? What kind of manners do they teach in Gerbera nowadays anyway? Come to think of it, you don't seem the right size for a king. The two-legged king always comes at 25 years of age, everyone knows it. So who are you exactly? I'm Blue. The fox cocked his head again. You're what now? Blue lifted his chin. Blue is what everyone calls me. And when the king of Gerbera died, the magic of the dragon tooth chose me as the replacement. Blue wondered if it all sounded as absurd to the fox as it did to him. The king died? Just this morning, said Blue, wondering why the fox would care. The fox raised a paw to his chin. But that's never happened. And you, a mere cub, chosen to take his place? Humans, sending their children straight to the mouths of the fire breathers. Blue shivered, grateful that Dragon Mountain remained hidden inside the dense tree canopy. The fox started forward, and Cedar walked alongside him without being prodded. That's some bad luck you have there, Blue. How can you talk? Asked Blue, eager to change the subject. I made a deal with a dragon many moons ago, the fox grinned. The fire breathers aren't all bad, you know. But that won't do you much good, I'm afraid. No offense. Blue wasn't sure what to say to that, so he fiddled absent-mindedly with his compass. A group of dragons used to dwell here, in fact, the fox continued, in this wildwood many centuries ago, before they moved to the mountain. These woods are laced with dragon magic even today. Is that why everything here is so strange? Blue asked with a shudder. That's right. If you're very still, you can feel it. Blue scrunched his nose. He had no desire to feel anything to do with dragons. Or magic. For example, those flowers there. The fox nodded to some wilted white flowers with huge black leaves. Allow you to listen in on a conversation hundreds of miles away. And if you head that way, he nodded to his left, you'll get caught in the no-hunger lands. You won't feel hungry, even when you actually are, and eventually it'll kill you. And what about the shadow bears? Asked Blue, because everyone knew about the shadowy forest bears with razor claws. Well, they're not really the creatures you need to worry about, are they? Blue narrowed his eyes. I feel loads better now, thanks. The fox laughed. I like you, human cub. The other kings were all so somber, dreary. Death, after all, is an expected part of life. You've met former kings? Just how old are you? Older than any human. It wasn't entirely an answer. You're more than the other animals, aren't you? Asked Blue. He wasn't sure how to better form the question, but there was clearly something about the fox. Something otherly. I find humans just as repulsive as any animal does, if that's what you mean. And yet you're still walking with me, Blue pointed out. Surely you could have hunted your rabbits by now. The fox's furry grin seemed to falter as he turned his gaze toward Dragon Mountain, now peeking through the treetops. I am the last goodbye, young one, the guide of many kings. Blue arched an eyebrow. Our meeting wasn't an accident, then? I've been waiting 25 years to meet you, Blue. Why? I'd like to think it makes it easier for you. A bit of companionship before your journey ends. The way the fox said it made it sound like a favor, and Blue did feel better. His heart rate had slowed. Cedar now trotted calmly, and Blue hadn't smelled any fear since the frozen stag. But why? Blue asked again. Curious. You're the first king to ask why. The minds of cubs are sharper than those of grown-ups, I've always said. It's because we're grateful, child. Have you never wondered why the forest animals leave your villages alone? Why your sheep and hens are never attacked by wolves out of the forest? Why the deer do not graze on Gerbera's crops? The deal the humans made with the fire breathers protects us all. humans are not the only creatures the dragons leave well enough alone. Blue considered this. As far as he knew, his kingdom had always flourished. At harvest time, farmers welcomed crops in abundance. Livestock roamed the hills freely. There were bedtime stories of the shadow bears with razor teeth who ate children in one gulp, but those tales were meant to keep children from running off into the forest. Blue had never heard of anyone actually being eaten by a bear.
So, is this your way of thanking us?
Blue asked. It is. My specific knack of magic deals with time, said the fox. I can stretch it or bend it just a bit, dodge it even. He laughed at some inward joke. And for you, Blue Boy, I can help pass the time in this dark, lonely wood. In fact, it's been nearly 7 hours that we've been talking. Blue looked up. The violets and dark blues of the night sky seeped through the cracks in the treetops. He gasped.
But...
Blue looked behind him. The stag was nowhere to be seen. In fact, his surroundings had changed entirely. Tall evergreens with glowing, rainbow-colored pine needles loomed over him. He scratched his head in wonder. How had he not noticed he was in a completely different place? He held up the compass. One arrow still pointed towards the black triangle, while the other pointed home. Don't worry, I've kept us on the trail, the fox assured him. I know the way.
But how?
Blue looked up again, and now stars peeked down at him through the tall trees. Had they really just made a full day's journey in mere minutes? And why was the fox so certain this was a good thing? Wasn't he really only bringing about Blue's death faster?
I'm not so sure I'm so eager to reach the mountain, thanks,
said Blue crossly. Would you rather have spent a full day in agony?
But these are my last minutes. Maybe I am frightened, but they're my minutes to live and breathe. And you've taken them from me.
One need not fear death, Blue scoffed.
That coming from a fox who apparently lives forever?
The fox laughed. Fair enough, but there's no use drawing it out. Better to end your misery swiftly. It is a kindness. Blue remembered one of the king's horses that had been severely injured years ago, with no hope of healing. Old man Albert had to kill it, he explained, to end its suffering. Blue might have been horrified, but the smell of fear and sorrow had clung so strongly to the horse, Blue had understood Albert's action as a kindness at the time. Was that how the fox saw Blue now? A wounded animal? Better off dead? The fox was silent for a long time. Blue kept thinking he needed to stop and make camp for the night, but the starry sky was already giving way to the dawn. Blue gripped the reins tighter. At this rate, he'd be in the dragon's belly in the next 5 minutes. There's something different about you, the fox said, almost too quietly for Blue to hear. You're not like the others.
Well, I don't have a beard, Blue pointed out. So there's that.
No, it isn't your age. It's something else. Blue scrunched his eyebrows together.
That'll be my knack for smelling emotions. Something I was born with.
Nope, nothing to do with knacks. The fox jumped, much higher than a fox should be able to jump, Blue thought, onto Cedar's neck. His snout hovered so close to Blue's nose, Blue could smell rotten meat on the animal's breath. What is it, boy? It's almost as if... Almost as if what? Blue urged. The song. Blue blinked, completely bewildered. Song? What song? The fox shook his head and laughed. Nothing. I may be very old and wise, but that doesn't mean I know everything. It's probably just because I'm hungry. The fox grinned. Anyhow, we're here. Blue peeked around the fox's silvery orange head. Here looked like the trees parting to reveal a wall of the great mountain. Down there, said the fox, nodding to the ground in front of them. Blue followed his gaze, his mouth dropping open. An enormous hole spread a good 10 feet in every direction. Blue swung down from Cedar, his legs a little stiff. But not as stiff as they should have been on a full day and a half's ride. Keeping hold of Cedar's reins, Blue inched closer to the massive void, his oversized royal tunic scraping the ground. "What's this?" asked Blue. "It's where you're headed." Blue's eyes grew as big as 2 moons. "In there?" "It's the entrance to Dragon Mountain," said the fox, jumping down next to Blue's feet. Blue chanced another glance at the monstrous hole. It was too dark to see anything. He groaned. "Come on, really? I have to go down the bottomless, creepy hole of death and then get eaten by a dragon?" "Your horse won't be able to join you either. It's too steep." Blue's heart sank, and he clutched the reins tighter. He hadn't expected to leave Cedar so suddenly. Of course, he hadn't expected any of this, but... He pushed his forehead gently against Cedar's muzzle. She whinnied softly, jerking her head up, motioning for him to get back in the saddle. "Sorry, girl. You can't come with me." Blue's voice hitched as he stroked her neck. It hadn't been that long ago that he'd helped nurse Cedar back to health when her mother died in labor. He'd moved his hay bed into Cedar's stall, had sung to her when she was scared, and snuck her carrots from the garden. She was the closest thing Blue had to a friend. "She'll get back home okay," said the fox. "I'll see to it. I always do." He grinned. "I even leave a note." An enormous dread carved into Blue's stomach, hollowing him out. Cedar's fear and sorrow hung in the air, but there was nothing to do to make her feel better. "You're a good girl," Blue whispered. "Some night we'll be real lucky to have you." Blue dropped the reins, and Cedar snorted her protest. He held 1 foot over the bottomless tunnel, and his chest tightened. There was nowhere to stand. The hole just dropped into complete darkness. "It's funny," said the fox. "I have the strangest feeling we'll meet again someday." Blue frowned. "I hardly see how that's likely." "Stranger things have happened in these parts." "If you say so." With one last look at Cedar, Blue closed his eyes and held an image of her face in his mind. Ignoring the orange woodsy smell clinging all around him, the king of Gerbera stepped into the dark hole and fell into the nothingness.